Summer League basketball is well underway, and the Memphis Grizzlies, so far, so good. We're going to talk about why each of the players the Grizzlies drafted and returned for their second or third stint in the Summer League have looked pretty good so far in the current situations, and why that bodes well for the Grizzlies coming up next season. On Locked On Grizzlies, let's get to it.
Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, Tennessee. First and foremost, we appreciate you for making Locked On Grizzlies one of your first listens each and every day, or your watches if you're tuning in on YouTube. But if you're listening on one of the many platforms, you can find it like Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Odyssey, wherever you find your podcasts. Locked On Grizzlies is there. We appreciate you for tuning in. We appreciate you for telling other people to tune in as well. We appreciate you for commenting, subscribing, and doing everything that you are doing to help us understand how we can continue to make the content better for you. That's the goal, and we're going to keep doing that. But appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. But the Summer League is underway. Summer League basketball is here. We spent a lot of time talking about how this player can develop, how that player can develop, what this young guy can do. Summer League is the time where the fans can actually see it with their own eyes. It's a big developmental stage for teams, and for the Grizzlies this season, it's probably the biggest. The Grizzlies are one of the teams most impacted by Summer League basketball this season. Why? The Grizzlies have 15 players on their Summer League roster. Of those 15, 9 have a direct impact on the current Grizzlies organization. Let me explain. 4 players drafted this season. You have 3 guys who are returning players from last season. You have 1 guy who you may call a returning player from last season who played with the G League in Shaq and Cannon. He did get a couple minutes up with the Grizzlies this past season, but he's mainly played with the Memphis Hustle. And then you have another guy who was an undrafted player who was signed to a 2-way deal in Kenneth Lofton Jr. That's 9 players, 4 draft picks, basically 4 returning players, and 1 guy who was an undrafted, who the team has already inked to a 2-way deal. That's a deep roster. And for a second, you wonder how are the Grizzlies going to divide the minutes for these guys? Then you look at the Summer League schedule. Actually, it's pretty easy. 3 consecutive games in Salt Lake City, Utah. Then you get a Friday off. And then you play Saturday in Vegas. Then you play Sunday in Vegas. Then you go a day off, a couple days off. Then 2 more games in Vegas. It's not a lot of sleep to go around. The players are about to be on a very tough, tight schedule. There's going to be some rest to be had. I know a lot of people want to see, the Grizzlies go full bore and start a guy like Ziaire Williams every game and things like that. It's not going to happen. We've seen 2 Grizzlies Summer League games so far. The results, so far, so good, I think. Game 1, the Grizzlies go out and win 103-99 over the Philadelphia 76ers. Then they turn around and lose game 2. But the starting lineup from game 1 did not play in that game. The starting lineup in game 1, well, Kennedy Chandler, Ziaire Williams, Jake LaRavia, Santi Aldama, Xavier Tillman Sr. That was the starting lineup in game 1. None of those guys played in the second game, plus David Roddy, the first-round pick, the 23rd overall selection. In addition to those players, He also did not play. So the only draft pick who played in the second game was Vince Williams. And also, Kenneth Lofton Jr., who you might as well, associate in that same helm as Vince Williams, because he came and started in the second game as well. The Grizzlies have learned a lot about these players. We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk a lot about what they've learned about these players. We're gonna talk about what we've learned about these players. We're gonna start with none other than Z himself, Ziaire Williams, because I've talked about it. My co-host Sean Coleman has talked about it as well. And with Ziaire Williams, he is one of the biggest keys to the summer for the Memphis Grizzlies. One of the biggest keys, and they have invested in him in that way. The Grizzlies have emphasized him playing on the ball in the offseason, putting him in those uncomfortable situations where Desmond Bane has talked about, last offseason, where he was in the Summer League in Salt Lake City, and he was, having to play point guard. And it worked out for Desmond Bane because next season, Morant misses some time, and the Grizzlies don't have 3 roster point guards. So Desmond Bane kind of became your de facto backup point guard in a lot of situations. So you have things like that. And Ziaire Williams, rookie season, a lot of spot-up shot attempts, one dribble, transition stuff, really simplistic game, but he improved. His confidence was through the roof. His shooting, it improved drastically. From the first part of the season where it looked like, did the Grizzlies draft the right guy with the 10th overall pick? The second part of the season was like, man, this guy's only 19, 20 years old, and the Grizzlies just got a pretty nice steal. And he could be a potential, starter at the 3 position going forward. But Ziaire Williams, so far, only played in game 1. I liked what we saw, and the main thing about Ziaire Williams was the on-the-ball improvement, right? We're talking about a guy during the regular season who averaged 1 assist. That's all he averaged in the regular season. And I mentioned it. It's because he had a very simplistic role. Ziaire Williams will tell you himself, this was the simplest role as a basketball player he's had in his entire career in terms of having the ball in his hands and things like that. Well, the Grizzlies said, okay, we're going to put the ball in your hands. We're going to put you in pick and roll. And that's where I think he succeeded more. Pick and roll, you saw him make some excellent reads. And I think that bodes well for the future in terms of how he can play in the half court. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to have him bringing the ball up the court that much. That's where he struggled more. He does have kind of a loose handle. And that's something over the course of time that will be worked on. But Ziaire Williams, check out the numbers. 8 assists, 15 points, 8 assists, 25 minutes. Shot 5 of 13 from the field. Shot 3 of 6 from three-point range. And I like the three-pointers that he was taking. We mentioned, you go back and look during the regular season, Ziaire Williams' three-point shots. You're going to see a lot of wide open. You're going to see a lot of quick, catch and shoot opportunities, some transition three-pointers. That's mostly what you're going to see. What we saw in Summer League was Ziaire Williams dribbling the ball, stepping up into three-point shots, coming off pick and rolls, three-point shots. We have not seen that from him. And he shot 3 of 6. I think the Grizzlies, you have Morant, you have Desmond Bane. Dylan Brooks, when he's on, he is that guy. But you need that consistent third scorer who can knock down those shots on the wing, who can take the pressure off of Desmond Bane or off of Morant and just really put the pressure on the defense and saying, hey, we want to guard Morant with a bigger, more athletic wing. But if we do that, we can't put a guy like Steph Curry on Ziaire Williams, like Golden State did last season. Golden State didn't put him on Desmond Bane. They didn't put him on Morant. They put Stephen Curry on Ziaire Williams, basically saying, hey, this is the one guy who we feel doesn't, impact them off the ball. Doesn't impact them in terms of getting his own shot and tiring out a defender like Steph Curry. Well, the potential is there, I think, from after what we saw in the Summer League game. There needs to be more to be seen. I want to see him bring the ball up the court a little bit more in comfortable situations, push it in transition. That's something you want to see from Ziaire Williams more because he's going to be rebounding the basketball. I mean, he's tall. We're talking about 6'8" guy, long arms. He's going to rebound the basketball. We love to see Ziaire Williams run the wing. I've said it so many times, and so many of the Locked On Grizzlies viewers, you've heard me say it. I think Ziaire Williams in his rookie season as a 19-year-old was already one of the best wings at running the floor. I mean, that's why he got a lot of those transition alley-oops. So you don't want to take that skill set away from him because you put the ball in his hand. You're taking away from him running the wing alongside of John Morant or Desmond Bane while they bring the ball up the floor. And, the Grizzlies get a lot of those easy, fast break transitions. But I think this is great development for his game. This is great for the half-court offense going forward. And we'll see how he just continues to pace himself and develop throughout this situation. I think what we've seen so far is encouraging on that end from Ziaire Williams. The 15 points, the 8 assists after averaging 1 assist per game during the regular season. There's more to unlock with Ziaire Williams. I think he looks like a better player. We need to see more from a strength perspective. Get to the hole, attack the basket, showcase, the fact that he said that this offseason improving his strength was one of his biggest goals. We need to see that. That's one of the biggest things I want to see from Ziaire Williams going forward. But after this, we're going to talk about something else I want to see from not just Ziaire Williams, but Kennedy Chandler, Jake LaRavia. They played in game 1 too, and they played pretty well. So we're going to recap that coming up as well. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about Rock Auto. You see, we're talking about, this Grizzlies team and how, they've hit on the margins and found these reliable players on the back end of the first round or in the back end of the second round that they're going to depend on. You need something to depend on to keep your car in top condition. And you don't have to pay, these crazy, outrageous prices. Rock Auto is your place. You don't have to go to these chain stores or these car dealerships. Go to rockauto.com. You can get a more affordable rate. And I'm talking, brake parts, tail lamps, whatever you need, Rock Auto has you covered. All you have to do is go to rockauto.com, write Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us section. All the parts that you ever need, reliable prices, Rock Auto. Go to rockauto.com, write Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us section, and go get a reliably low price, just like the Grizzlies are doing right now, getting reliably production from these lower draft picks. Speaking of reliable production from lower draft picks, Jake LaRavia is a guy that the Grizzlies kind of zeroed in on, right? This is a guy that, the fan base, I think, didn't know as well, and there was some skepticism after you saw the Grizzlies trade their 2 first-round picks, 22 and 29, and move up and say they want Jake LaRavia at 19. Well, I think we saw why the Grizzlies did that. Not just because of what he did in the Summer League game. Yeah, great game. The bigger picture here is Jake LaRavia has played himself into the competition of the potential starting power forward while Jaren Jackson Jr. is out. He's played himself into that potential competition because he came out and, stats aside, we will get to the stats. Jake LaRavia has a shooting stroke, a smooth shooting stroke. Shot the ball well. He looks confident. And, I mean, he fit alongside those guys. I'll explain that in a second. But Jake LaRavia, first game action, 13 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. Had a nice chase down block as well. But a lot of question was about, his foot speed. 6'9" guy. How is he going to deal with those quicker, smaller guys? The 76ers roster didn't, give him much stress test in that. So that's where we want to see from Jake LaRavia. How does he handle those guys? Because that's the next step in the evolution for him. But in terms of being a floor spacer, I think he already has the IQ. I've seen a lot of people talk about Jake LaRavia's IQ what he brings to the table in terms of his mind. He has the potential, to be that type of rookie who can step in day one and really be impactful because IQ wise, a lot of people will tell you this guy is smart. And you see it on the floor because he knows where to go on the floor. He knows how to place the floor and he knows how to get wide open. He knows how to make the defense think with just subtle movements. And you watch him play beside Kennedy Chandler and Ziaire Williams, and you say, man, that could be Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, or Ziaire Williams at the three. And you put this guy at the four. And I think it was my guy Parker Fleming or over there at Grizzly Bear Blues, and they tweeted out after the first game something like, Tyus Jones and Ja Morant are gonna have some fun when they see Desmond Bane at the two, Ziaire Williams at the three, and Jake LaRavia at the four, on the 3-point line. And Tyus Jones and Ja Morant both replied, to that tweet, basically saying, yeah, that's going to be them. Because you look at it from Ja Morant's perspective, you're talking about one of the best downhill scorers in the NBA right now, led the NBA in paint scoring. We saw in that series against the Timberwolves where he struggled the most in terms of scoring in the paint. And we've seen at any part of the season, it was because they collapsed in the paint. The Grizzlies had to make shots. Desmond Bane made shots. No one else consistently made shots that series for the Grizzlies from the 3-point line. That being said, you add a guy like Jake LaRavia who can space the floor, who has a smooth shooting stroke. That changes some things. I think what the Grizzlies saw in that game from him, you saw a guy who could really be impactful on both ends. But we'll see, over the course how he continues to develop 13 points. I like the 4 rebounds and 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block. The chase down block was actually really impressive. So Jake LaRavia is a guy. Want to monitor his progression over the course of his summer league. The shooting stroke, it didn't surprise me at all. I knew shooting. I felt like shooting was a strength of his. He wasn't a high volume shooter from the 3-point line in college, but the Grizzlies clearly, did their homework here. So again, feels like another Zach Kleiman masterpiece. Only one summer league game. We don't want to overreact. One summer league game for him. We will see how he continues to play, but all signs point to him being a contributor going forward. Speaking of contributors, what about Santi Aldama? Will he be a contributor? Because we're talking about the 4 position. We're talking about, Jake LaRavia being an option. Some people have, said, hey, what do you think about Santi Aldama as the potential starting power forward while Jaren Jackson Jr. is rehabbing from, his foot surgery? And I think he's an option to consider for sure. Because 1, he's going to space the floor. 2, for his size, Santi Aldama is a nimble guy, as we've seen, throughout parts of last season and with the G League hustle. I mean, he averaged over 20 points per game in the G League with the hustle. And then 3, he has a shooting range. So Santi Aldama, I think there's more to see. You still want to see him look stronger. You still want to see him, dominate matchups at his size. You still want to see him use his height a little bit more in certain situations. Santi Aldama in this game, 13 points, 3 rebounds. So that's something, you want to see go up as well. 2 assists, and he shot 5 of 9 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3-point range. So again, 2 of 3 from 3-point range. He didn't shoot it that well in terms of in the G League last season. So that was actually impressive to see Santi Aldama shoot the basketball even better. But Santi Aldama is an option here. This is a guy who, the Grizzlies drafted with a first-round pick, just a year ago. And at the end of the day, you're drafted with a first-round pick. The pressure's on. This is the offseason as well for Santi Aldama. We've talked a lot about what this offseason means for Ziaire Williams. Santi Aldama is not too far off, especially, you talk about that 4 position with Jaren Jackson Jr. out. Someone's going to have to hold the 4. You're either going to be dependent on a guy like Jake LaRavia. You're either going to depend on a guy like Brandon Clark, who you're probably going to put in a different position he completely excelled at the 5. I know Taylor Jenkins may not want to mess with that wrinkle as much in terms of having him operate and do most of his damage in the paint and around the rim. Because at that 4 position, you're asking him basically to be more of a floor spacer, to really do his damage around the rim that he's been doing, but in a more complicated way, because he has to pick his chances, his spots. Sometimes you need to space the floor for Ja and Dez. Sometimes you need to be, in the paint, doing what has made Brandon Clark, a successful player on this team. But then, Santi Aldama, talking about 7-foot nimble guy. I think he more than held his own in that first game against the 76ers. He's someone else who you want to see from the strength perspective. I think that's the biggest key for Santi Aldama as well. Bang with guys. Use your size. Use your height. Take advantage of noticeable mismatches. If Santi Aldama does start, there are going to be a lot of 6'8" small forwards, a lot of 6'7" wings, maybe a little bit bigger on the bottom, 6'7", 220 wings and things like that. That's the direction that a lot of NBA teams are going in. And if that's the case, Santi Aldama will be in position to dominate those matchups. But both of the players that we just mentioned, Jake LaRavia, Santi Aldama, encouraging performances. Coming up next, we're going to finish up with a couple more guys. Kennedy Chandler, Kenneth Lofton, David Roddy. How did they look? We'll talk about that coming up next. But before we get to that, speaking of how something looked, I love how chocolate looks. And the best chocolate out there right now, best bar out there right now, is Built Bar. 100% without a doubt, because Built Bar gives you so many different options. And we're talking about real chocolate. And they have milk, mint brownie options, coconut almond, the white chocolates, cookies, and cream options. The thing about Built Bar is going to prioritize the good taste. Going to make sure it tastes good for you. Going to make sure you like the way it tastes, but they also emphasize making it as healthy as possible. So we're talking half as many calories as a lot of these, chocolate bars and candy bars that you get out here. And remember this, Built Bars are covered 100% in real chocolate. How can you go get you a Built Bar? Well, it's simple. All you have to do is go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Again, go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. So we've kind of summed up a lot of these picks so far. Kennedy Chandler, Kenneth Lofton, David Roddy are the main 3 guys we haven't discussed. We didn't discuss Xavier Tillman Sr. much on this episode. We'll talk more about him going forward. He also had a very impressive opening game as well. I want to make sure that I mention that. Xavier Tillman, 16 points, 4 assists. So he really showed some, dribble handoff stuff that you like to see the Grizzlies do. With Steven Adams, we saw this season. With Brandon Clark, 4 assists for Xavier Tillman. That was impressive. But how about Kennedy Chandler? So there was all this talk, right? All this talk, he's 6 feet. If he's 6'1", or he's listed at that, but he may not even be that tall, and this and that. Well, Zach Kleiman came out to draft, after the draft, and he basically told, so I'm kind of, paraphrasing, but he kind of dispelled the whole notion about Kennedy Chandler being too short and all of that. So the Grizzlies weren't concerned about his height. And if you look at it a little bit deeper, why should they be concerned? Tyus Jones is right in between 6 feet and 6'1", and the Grizzlies just committed $15 million per season to him. But the difference is Tyus Jones doesn't have a 40-inch vertical like Kennedy Chandler. That's a big difference. We saw that 40-inch vertical on display when Chandler got up. Not for 1, not for 2, 3 blocks. One of them being a chase down block where he just comes right over a guy's shoulder, shows off the complete vertical, and probably almost hit his head on the rim. Kennedy Chandler, 4 steals, 3 blocks in game 1, including the clincher in the 103-99 victory against the Sixers. I think he showed more than anything, he can stay on the floor if the Grizzlies want to play 2 point guards at one time. Because that's the question, right? If you play those guys at one time, you're going to have smaller guards guarding bigger guards in the NBA. You're going to have either Chandler or Tyus or Chandler or Ja guarding the bigger shooting guards. Well, with that being said, Kennedy Chandler, from a defensive perspective, from the intensity perspective, from being just a pest for a guy wreaking havoc, he showed all of that potential in game one. 8 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, but he also had 4 steals, 3 blocks, team high plus 10 in terms of his plus minus ratio. So Kennedy Chandler, I think, was one of the biggest highlights in that first game for me. Then there was Big David Roddy, right? 6'5", 255. A lot of people wanted to see him. Well, the athleticism is off the charts. David Roddy was throwing down windmills in the warm-ups, and I mean, he looks the part. Here's a guy who, he was the one guy, they're deep. The Grizzlies are deep. David Roddy came off the bench in game one, and he was the one guy who made, if you talk about all the players that we've mentioned, how they all excelled and didn't look in over their heads, he was the one guy that probably you may have said, okay, we definitely need to see more of him going forward. 4 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals in game one. He didn't get as much time as the starters. All the starters played more than 22 minutes. David Roddy, only 17 minutes on the floor. So there was that. I think the potential for him, we'll see, because Jake LaRavia, David Roddy, you're talking about 2 combo fours, 2 guys that are going to play the 3, 2 guys that are going to play the 4. You got to imagine if Ziaire Williams plays the way that he did in game one, he won't play much more in Summer League. That's going to open up another starting spot, potentially for David Roddy, where we get to get a better look at him. Another draft pick that we got to see was Vince Williams, the second rounder. And he's the one guy who played in 2 games, along with Kenneth Lofton, who we'll get to next. Vince Williams, he has a great shooting stroke. First game, 9 points, 3 or 4 shooting from three-point range. Second game, kind of disappeared, right? 0 points, 0 4 from three-point range. And you're like, man, that's the Grizzlies' second-round pick. He didn't score, and he had the bigger opportunity. Well, here's the thing about Vince Williams that I've noticed through 2 games. I think what he excels at is being a player, kind of how I mentioned with Jake LaRavia earlier, a complementary piece. Not a guy that you're going to give the ball to and say, everybody move out of the way. Let's Vince Williams create this shot and go get us a bucket. This is a guy who's going to get to his spots on the floor, and he's going to space the floor for the better creators, and he's going to make teams pay if they help off of him and leave him open. That's his game. In the second game, Kennedy Chandler didn't play. Ziaire Williams, who had 8 assists in the first game, did not play. Tremont Waters, a good scoring guard, I think, from his time at LSU and SEC guard, but that was his starting point guard, and I think to a certain degree, just the situation that the team was in. We're talking the Grizzlies shot 50% from the field, 51% from the field, 50% from 3 in the first game. Well-oiled machine, ball movement well, and everyone was getting good looks, open shots. Second game, 30% shooting from the field, a lot of missed shots. The ball wasn't moving as crisp, and I think Vince Williams was kind of one of those guys who was mainly impacted by that. And so, in simpler words, you put Vince Williams on the floor with guys who can create and get him the ball in easier situations. I think his shot, his jumper plays better than if you put him on the floor in situations where he has to do more work, or he has to depend on creators who aren't as good as typical starting creators in the NBA. Then you have those problems. So take that, how you will, because I think with Vince Williams, there is more potential there. We'll see how he develops in terms of being able to do some of those things, on his own, in terms of shot creating, coming off of screens and things like that. But the difference between his first game and his second game was as simple as shot opportunities. He just didn't look as comfortable getting his shots off in game 2. How about Big Kenneth Lofton Jr.? He said to call him Junior. He said that's what everyone calls him, because people wonder, what do you call him, Kenny? Do you call him Kenneth? What do you call this guy? Call him Junior, and call him buckets. we've seen all of the Zach Randolph and the Glenn Big Baby Davis and all these comparisons. The guy's a hooper, 6'7", 275. One thing that I've liked about him is he's real nimble. He's not 6'7", 275 and carrying, it's not like he's wearing big polo boots on the floor. His feet are light, which is good for a big man because in the NBA, spacing is a big deal. And most big men have to learn how to move their feet, so they can play in those late game situations and, when they get switched on the guards, hold their own and things like that. Well, Kenneth Lofton Jr., game one, again, came off the bench and he played well. He had actually one of the prettiest buckets of the game where he drove the ball to the left side, kind of did this turnaround fadeaway with his left hand, and the jumper looked smooth. So I think in game one, we saw Kenneth Lofton finally getting his bag a little bit. Only 15 minutes, but 9 points, 3 rebounds. He was the biggest beneficiary of all of those starters sitting out in game two. The Grizzlies lost 87-71, right? We mentioned that. We mentioned that this team only shot 30% from the field, right? The Grizzlies struggled. 30% from the field, 20%, 20.5% from three-point range. The one guy who didn't struggle was Kenneth Lofton Jr. The numbers, 19 points, 6 rebounds, 8 of 17 shooting from the field, 2 of 6 shooting from the three-point line. One of his three-pointers, he made a deep one and, got dapped up by John Morant. The other three-pointer came actually after he got a steal, came up in transition, pulled up. I mean, the guy got game. Kenneth Lofton Jr. has game. He's on a two-way deal. It's going to be fun to watch him. And I need to mention, this was against Chet Holmgren, the number 2 overall pick who set the Summer League record on Tuesday with 6 blocks. Well, how many blocks did Chet Holmgren have against this team, against the Grizzlies, when he mainly guarded Kenneth Lofton Jr.? 1. 1 block for Chet Holmgren. Well, he actually finished with 2, but only one of those was on Kenneth Lofton Jr. because the big man went at him. You saw some of those things that people were concerned about with Chet, but you also saw some of the strengths of Kenneth Lofton Jr. He put his head down. He went to the left side of the basket, and he went to work against Chet Holmgren. He got on the block. He made some jump shots, but he got to the rim. He made the three-pointer. You're talking about a real triple threat here in terms of a guy who can face up. He has the turnaround jumper. He can put the ball on the floor. It's some guard-like stuff for a 6'7", 275 big. I've been really impressed with him so far. He's the guy we've seen the most in the 2 nights overall from the guys that could potentially impact the Grizzlies roster. But there's more to come. I'll be in Salt Lake City with much more coverage of what's going on with the Grizzlies. And I'll also head over to Las Vegas. So I'll catch the last game in Salt Lake City. Me and Sean Coleman should be here to recap what's going on there. And then we'll get started with the Summer League in Vegas. That's where everyone's playing. That's where they say, hey, it gets real. That's where everyone's competing to win, as well as the developmental stage as well. So we're going to cover all of that on the next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. But before you go, thanks for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen every day. It's next up for your second listen. Make sure you get up to date on the latest news and rumors in the NBA, and you can do that in just 30 minutes with Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA is your daily NBA update in 30 quick minutes. You get everything going on with all the teams around the league, as well as getting those fillers on the potential rivals or the potential teams who could impact what's going on this offseason and who could actually impact what's going on in Memphis with the Grizzlies. Locked On NBA is your place to get that content. But we appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. We're going to have more Summer League coverage coming up over the next few days. We appreciate you. Until next time, we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.